could renewable energy be the solution to the country's energy crisis? The professor of physics at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Hartmut Winkler, says the country's power generation is still dominated by coal and it's lagging far behind the global trends toward clean energy. Winkler says the country should look into a target of 50% electricity from renewables, which is feasible, he says. Well, he joins me now to talk us through exactly why he thinks that the renewable energy boom is the only way to escape this downward spiral. Professor, good morning to you and thank you very much for your time. So let's start with the expected announcement by the president, because you touch on it, albeit briefly, right towards the end, to say there is now a recognition that the energy crisis in South Africa should be treated as such. The reported drastic announcements that are going to be made by the president, what do you think he's going to tell us?
Yes, well, I think he's going to be saying exactly what I suggested in the article, namely that they're going to pump up the rollout of renewable energy, that's mainly wind and solar plants, which is, by the way, something which is not completely new. According to the country's electricity plan, this was going to be happening anyway. By the year 2050, according to the last plan we had 3 years ago, half the country was going to be running on renewables. But we're lagging behind on that. The announcement that they were going to be building some new wind plants, which Minister Mantashe did less than a year ago, that was supposed to have happened about 2 years ago, because those plants were supposed to be coming online this year, and clearly they won't. They'll only be coming online in about 2024. Yeah. So we're running about 2 years behind with everything. So partly I think it's an exercise in catching up. But what we also will need to do, because according to that plan I mentioned, there was going to be some new coal plants being built. I think that's increasingly unlikely because financing just won't happen. Virtually all financiers don't want to be seen as financing greater greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah. So the only real options to do this in a relatively short time span is renewables. Yeah. And it's been done elsewhere. That's really the point I've been making.
And you mentioned the example of Germany, but we're going to talk about that a little later. I want to start with the belief by some people that the renewables contribute very little to the grid as we speak, and add to that, they are very expensive. That's the view that they hold. So how are we going to gain confidence in such, if indeed their speculations around this are correct?
No, they're indeed right. At the moment, renewables are contributing of just more than 10%. And of that, about a third comes from hydropower, which we've always had for decades now. So, yes, we are producing very little. And yet this is a country which has got ideal conditions. We've got sunshine hours which are much longer than many of the other countries that have invested in this kind of technology. And certainly along the coastlines, but even inland, we've got very good wind as well. So it's not that we're doing something which isn't being done elsewhere. So certainly as far as a percentage of renewables, we are actually very, very low and should be higher given our resources. As far as the cost is concerned, yes, the very first installations of that nature, which happened about 10 years ago, they were very expensive because then, especially photovoltaic solar panels, were much, much more expensive than they are now. However, the prices have dropped, and in the last round of announcement of plants which are now being built, those prices are considerably lower than, say, nuclear and gas, and also clearly lower than even coal right now. Yeah. So we are now heading in a situation where solar and wind are seen to be among the cheaper technologies. And this is also, one can also see that in those entities which can afford to install their own power, And that can be domestic homes, that can be malls, that can be mining houses. They are going for solar and wind. They wouldn't do that if it was more expensive.
Yeah. All right. Let's then use the example, Germany, that you point out in your article. And you say the following, that Germany now generates over half of their electricity from renewables. More countries are setting roadmaps to achieve 100% renewable electricity. But, Professor, more recently we heard that Germany is now looking to reopen their coal plants, which were mothballed some time ago because of the gas squeeze from Russia. The skeptics, I put it to you, are going to be even more skeptical about renewable energy because the Western nations that are putting pressure on us, developing nations, to move away from fossil fuels are themselves going back to fossils.
Yes, that's right. It is a bit embarrassing, but this is, if they were closer to 100%, which a country like Germany would find much more difficult than other countries, then it's indeed they would be. Yeah, sorry, let me just change that. Yes, no, sure. They are now at the moment forced to do things. In fact, they might even be forced to open some of their nuclear plants, which they've closed again. But this is not seen as something that's going to continue indefinitely. It's something is seen as a temporary solution to get past this gas crisis. Certainly, Germany made the mistake that they were over-reliant on Russia, and now Russia can squeeze the taps and just simply not provide any more of the gas, and that certainly sets up a problem. Now, how they're responding to that is that they're going even more in the direction of renewables. They're building more wind plants offshore and so on. So it's not that this going back to coal is seen more as an interim measure that they're forced in simply because it takes a while to actually develop the renewables. Plus, in Europe, there's a lot of interchange of energy. So once other countries are able to have a more stable electricity supply, then they can. One country can just simply give to the other when the wind's not blowing. Also, in South Africa, it's a little bit more difficult. So we are more reliant on storage facility. That's why I'm not saying that South Africa is going to be going 100% renewable anytime in the foreseeable future. Yeah. But I still think that 50% is quite achievable.
But you do hold the view, and a strong one at that, that South Africa has some of the best solar and wind resources. Why do you think this has not been explored, Professor, or even why is it that government, or even Eskom, for that matter, has not pursued this with the necessary vigor if, as you put it, the costs are also that much more economical?
I think it's largely got to do with the various spheres of interest. There is a lot depends on the coal economy. There's a lot of businesses in Mpumalanga and so on which are reliant on how the current economy there, which is based on coal, is run. So it's not surprising that there would be some opposition in some quarters to this, because some people, quite frankly, are making their money from coal. And similar with nuclear, it's not as big a fraction, but there certainly are people that are would stand to gain a lot from nuclear plants being built. And I think that's to a large extent what's been happening. And on the other hand, of course, yes, you could say other people would stand to gain from renewables as well. So unfortunately, yes, this energy argument has been politicized, and it's been run very much by the financial players, which it shouldn't be. But I think the end result is just simply going to be people are going to be going for the technologies which work out the cheapest if they are feasible. And at the moment, it really looks like it's going to be renewables. Eskom, by the way, is not forced to simply produce its own coal and nuclear. They even own the wind farm, which has been operating for quite a few years now. And there's nothing stopping them from building their own solar farm. So if there are problems with independent power producers because these are private sector, there's nothing stopping from Eskom from developing their own.
Well, it's a good question, therefore, to ask them why it is that they simply have not done this. But let's leave the conversation there. Professor of Physics at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Hartmut Winkler, thank you very much for your time.